Welcome to True Crime by Indie Drop-In. Each week we feature an episode from the best independent creators. Hit subscribe for more great true crime content. If you would like to support Indie Drop-In and get these episodes ad-free, check out our Patreon at the bottom of the show notes. Today's episode is from Happy Hour Gets Weird. Don't forget to check out the show notes for links to subscribe and follow on social media. Enjoy the show.
Begin. Are you that weirdo that loves an I survived story? Well, then this is the podcast for you. Welcome to Happy Hour Gets Weird.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, and welcome back, or if this is your first time, welcome to your new favorite podcast. I'm Cassie.
And I'm Tiffany.
And this is Happy Hour Gets Weird.
On this podcast, we have a cocktail and talk about
weird shit.
We've done it. We have done it again. The perfect intro.
It gets better every time.
What is our cocktail this week?
I am drinking you might hear ice clinking in my glass. That's because I have a martini on ice. I know, call me crazy.
Crazy.
Wouldn't be the first time or the last. Okay, so I am drinking Whatta Pear Cardamom and Pear Martini, and it's fantastic. I put it on ice to keep it chilled during our episode, but normally I like it without ice.
It sounds so good, and what a great, we'll go over the ingredients, but what a great fall cocktail.
Okay, so it's super delicious, super easy, and super fall inspired. It is pear-infused vodka or pear-flavored vodka, whatever you prefer, lemon juice, honey, cinnamon, and that's it. Super simple. And then you shake it and pour it in a glass, and you're having a fall party. It's harvest time.
And cardamom bitters, right?
Oh, fuck, and cardamom bitters.
Which is the best part. The Scrappy's bitters.
I know. Oh, my God. Sorry, Tessa. Cardamom, I think, is my favorite flavor so far from bitters.
I love cardamom in general. I I bought just cardamom to add a little bit extra to whatever fall baking stuff I'm doing. Because sometimes the recipe will call for just pumpkin spice seasoning or whatever, or just cinnamon and nutmeg, and I always add cardamom. It's so good.
Oh, it's so, 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 so good. So this martini is delicious. It's delicious. I highly recommend it. 5 out of 5.
And for the recipe, go to our Instagram.
We always list pictures and the recipe for our drinks. So, yeah, if you're not following us, go do that.
All right. Are you ready to get into our stories for today?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
What is our topic? In case somebody blindly pressed play and did not read the title of this podcast.
Or skip through our intro. We are doing I survived stories, or stories of escape or survival, whatever you want to call it. I'm excited about it, but I just want to say, I'm going to go first. Mm-hmm. I just want to say my story is a very disturbing story. I'm going to talk about the details of the experience, and listener discretion is advised.
Thank you for that.
All right, so my sources for this episode are I Survived, Season 5, Episode 18, Escaped, Season 1, Episode 3 on the ID Network, an article on Ranker by Laura Allen, and court documents from this case. Baraboo, Wisconsin. 2 hours from Milwaukee, the small town of Baraboo is populated by cheese-loving, beer-drinking Midwesterners, don't you know? It was in this small Wisconsin town, Thaddeus Phillips would experience an unthinkable and terrifying story of survival. July 29th, 1995, 13-year-old Thad Phillips and his family had just moved into a new house in Baraboo. Falling asleep while watching TV on the couch, Thad was awoken by someone picking him up. Thinking it was his dad bringing him to his room for the night, Thad wasn't alarmed. He quickly realized it wasn't his dad, but an unfamiliar man. The man carried Thad outside and asked him to run with him. Thinking he was a friend of the family needing help, Thad went along and ran with him. On episode 18, season 5 of I Survived, Thad explained he wasn't alarmed because he thought the man needed help fixing his car. He thought, okay, maybe the guy asked my dad for help. My dad said no, so he was asking me for help. He was confused more than scared. They arrived at the house just a mile from Thad's own house. On the episode of I Survived, Thad said the house was, quote, a real dump. It was disgusting with trash everywhere, old food, old dishes. And it was then he realized this guy wasn't a friend of the family. In fact, he wasn't a man at all. He was a boy, just a few years older than himself. The boy introduced himself as Joe. Joe said he was going to throw a party and named a few other boys that Thad recognized. And in the meantime, Joe asked if Thad liked model cars and baseball cards. He led him upstairs to his room, and once there, he showed his model cars and his album of baseball cards, and then was talking about the party and who was coming and when it was happening. All of a sudden, almost like a switch being flicked, Joe stopped talking. As Thad looked at baseball cards on the bed, Joe took hold of his right foot and twisted it until the bone above his ankle snapped and splintered.
Oh my God.
Crying out from shock and pain, Thad knew at that point he was in trouble. Joe then put his hands on his head, almost as if he was sorry that he did it. In that moment, Thad jumped up, made a run for it because of the adrenaline. He didn't feel the friction of his broken bone.
Oh my God.
Reaching the top of the stairs, he managed to hop down on his one good foot. Thad made it as far as the kitchen before Joe was behind him, putting him in a chokehold, dragging him to the living room floor, where he raised his right leg up over his head until his thigh bone snapped in two. Thad asked him why he was doing this, and Joe said he had a fascination with the sounds of breaking bones. Joe then takes Thad's left foot in his hand and twists it until the bone breaks.
What?
Yeah.
This is horrible.
Yeah. Thad said both his feet were backwards at one point.
God.
He said the skin between his shin and his foot was like a rubber band.
Ugh, this is like giving me chills and making me
physically sick.
Yeah, like I don't feel good.
When I watched the episodes, I was like physically sick. Joe threw Thad on a spare couch and tells him to get some sleep. Thad obviously can't fucking sleep. He said he had too much adrenaline running through his body, and all he could think about was his family. The very family that was searching for him, totally unaware that he's less than a mile away from his house. In the morning, after a few hours of sleep, Joe wakes up and picks up right where he left off. With Thad's torture, he twists his feet and ankles again and again and again, multiple times a day, like almost every hour on the hour. He would go in and retwist the breaks and re-break the bones. And at this point, Thad tried to fight back. When he was laying down and Joe was twisting his ankles, Joe's back was to Thad's face. Mm-hmm. So he said he would sit up and like punch him on the back, on the head. He would scream. He would hit him. He would try to fight back. He'd try to rip his legs away from him. And Joe eventually put a pillow over Thad's face and said, if you don't stop fighting, I'm going to break your back.
Jesus Christ.
Thad, at that point, knew if he wanted to survive, he had to do what he was told. And he just took the torture and the beating and screamed into the pillow as it continued. Eventually, Thad realized, okay, I have to make this guy my friend. Maybe if I humanize myself, he wouldn't want to hurt me anymore. So Thad tried to strike up a conversation between himself and Joe in between the bouts of abuse. He asked him at one point, have you ever done this before? And Joe said, yes, I have. And he asked Thad if he knew a boy by the name of Chris Steiner.
Oh, no.
Thad said he didn't know him. And a year ago, 14-year-old Chris Steiner's body had been found tangled in branches in a secluded area of the Baraboo River. His cause of death was drowning, and his manner of death was ruled undetermined. And I learned researching this case that there's a difference between cause of death and manner of death. Mm-hmm. Cause of death would be like drowning, like water in your lungs. And manner of death is, there's like 4 categories, I think. And it's homicide, suicide, undetermined, and natural causes.
Okay.
So it was ruled, the manner of death was ruled undetermined, but the cause of death was drowning.
So they didn't know why he had drowned.
No.
Basically.
Or how he got there. What had happened a year ago is Chris's parents woke up in the morning and he was missing. And his screen was slashed open, and there were muddy footprints in his room and also outside the house, and a slider door that was normally locked was left unlocked but closed. They were suspicious about Chris Steiner's death, but they didn't have any proof. They didn't know, okay, did he cut his own screen and run away? Although he was a good boy, he wasn't a runaway. He didn't have problems like that. They just didn't have any proof. So it was basically left opened and kind of unsolved. So a year later, almost to the day, Thad became Joe's next victim. Thad was concerned that his captor was so freely confessing, it could only mean one thing. He was going to kill him. 15 hours into his torture, Thad heard Joe talking on the phone and made a mental note that there was a working phone in the house. Joe would go over the broken bones in his legs and ankles, twisting and turning them, hitting them, stomping them, jumping on them. I mean, he's a fucking psychopath. He's a monster, like pure evil.
Yeah, this is brutal. And it's also so impressive that Thad had any sort of presence of mind to think, try to be his friend, remember this phone. And he was so young and going through this horrible experience. It's incredible that he could even think straight at all.
Yeah, he had a presence of mind, and there was a psychologist that gave an interview on the episode of Escaped, and the psychologist said, Thad had his body taken from him, and the only thing that he had in his possession was his mind. And he really used his mind to survive. Mm-hmm. So not only did this fucking nutcase Joe torture Thad, but what he would do was he would make rudimentary casts for his legs in between the torture, and then he would force Thad to walk on his legs.
What?
Yeah, it's really fucking weird and strange, and it's scary. So the internal bleeding caused by Thad's breaks made his legs swell up as big as basketballs. They were, oh my God, huge. They were purple, they were green, they were yellow. At one point, his left kneecap was totally backwards. It was at the back of his leg. Oh. His feet were misshapen and grotesquely angled. And after a bout of torture, Joe would layer. Now, this is where it gets real, like, fucking strange. So after he would twist and turn and beat on Thad's legs, Joe would layer perfectly clean white cotton socks on Thad's feet. Like layers, like one after the other. And despite Joe's house being a garbage dump, it was disgusting. Like, disgusting. They showed a video of it on Escaped. It was disgusting. Mm-hmm. Despite that filth that he lived in, his drawers were full of 300 pairs of perfectly clean, brand new white socks.
So this was like a fucked up foot fetish also, it seems like, along with the bone breaking.
Yeah, it was weird. So he would place the socks perfectly. The toe line had to be just right. The ribs that go up the ankle and the shin had to be perfectly straight. The heel had to be just right. And it was layer after layer after layer after layer. So he would put several pairs of socks on his feet over and over and over again. Strange. fucking strange.
Yeah.
So Friday night is when Thad was kidnapped. And by Sunday afternoon, Thad begged Joe to let him go. He begged him to let him go. He said, I'll tell people I fell over a table. Like, I won't tell anyone. And Joe actually toyed with him saying, maybe I'll let you go. Maybe I will. And then he would say, no, it's too late for that. I can't let you go. Then Thad asked, okay, well, just let me call my parents. Like, just to let them know I'm okay. I won't tell them where I am. I know they're going to be looking for me. I just want to let them know I'm okay. And Joe said, all right, I'll let you call him. And he got up from the couch and he went across the living room and he grabbed a phone and he brought it back to Thad. And he said, okay, you can call him. Thad picked up the phone, went to dial, put the receiver to his ear, and there was no dial tone. It wasn't plugged into anything. He was just fucking with him. So not only was he physically torturing him, he was psychologically torturing him the entire time. Joe left that night, but before he left, he made sure that he jumped and stomped on Thad's legs. Leaving Thad on his bed, he was picked up by his girlfriend. Thad took his chance to escape. As he heard the car drive away, he rolled off the bed and slithered out of Joe's room. His legs were completely useless. He was dragging himself by his arms. And he got to the top of the stairs and he had no choice but to throw himself down the stairs head first. There was no way to get down the stairs. So he threw himself down the stairs and he passed out at the bottom of the stairs from pain. Once he came to, he dragged himself to the kitchen where the one working phone was in the house. He only got as far as the living room before he passed out again. And he woke up and he dragged himself a few more feet and then he passed out again. And then he woke up and he dragged himself a few more feet and he passed out again. And he woke up and it was this time that he realized Joe was home.
Oh my God, no.
Yeah, he was in the kitchen with his girlfriend. And
the girlfriend was still there?
She had dropped him off. And they were saying goodbye. They were like hugging and kissing and saying their goodbyes. And Thad was so terrified. He didn't know. Should I call out? Is she part of it? Will she join in on it? Will he get so mad and kill us both? He didn't know. So he was frozen. So he hid himself. And then Joe found him. And he said actually Joe was so surprised that he had made it down the stairs. He was kind of shocked for a minute. And then his shock turned to fury, and he dragged him back up the stairs for more torture, and he just was pounding and twisting Thad's legs. He just took all of his fury out on Thad's body. Thad had so much grit. Like, I can't even imagine the willpower of it. He could literally do anything in this life with the willpower that he has.
Seriously, it's incredible.
I know. So on the third day of torture, which Thad said was by far the worst day, Joe is waiting for his girlfriend to pick him up. But he really beats on him this day. Like, he said he would run and jump with landing, like aiming both of his knees on his legs.
Oh my God. And this guy has a girlfriend. Imagine that. This monster has a girlfriend.
Well, this monster is only 17 years old.
And he lives by himself, though?
No, he doesn't live by himself. And what I left out was he actually lives with his parents, but they were out of town visiting his sister.
Oh, okay. I was thinking he must have been 18, but he was only 17.
Only 17, and his parents were out of town for the weekend.
Jesus Christ.
I know.
This is such a sick, sick kid.
Yeah, he's fucked up for sure. So Thad, the only thing, like I said, the only thing he had in control was his mind. So he knew, because he had heard the phone conversation between Joe and his girlfriend, so he knew that Joe was waiting for his girlfriend to come pick him up. So what he would do is he would say, oh, I think I hear something. I hear your girlfriend. And Joe would stop torturing him and go to the window. He basically tricked him for like 10 seconds of peace. That happened several times. And after each time Joe would come back from the window, he would be angrier than the time before. And he would beat him even harder. But Thad said that 10 seconds where he wasn't torturing me was all I needed for the next to get to the next 10 seconds. Finally, ready to leave, Joe put Thad in the closet this time. Because last time when he left him out on his bed. And this time he put him in the closet to keep him there. Now, this is Wisconsin in the summertime. This is July, August. And Wisconsin is fucking hotter than hell in the summertime. And it's humid. And this closet was fucking hot as hell. He knew he had to get out because time was running out for him. He hadn't had anything to eat. He didn't have any water. He had internal bleeding. He knew it was now or never. He looked around for anything in that closet, and this closet was disgusting. And he found buried on the bottom of a dirty clothes pile a wooden guitar, and he beat the door down with a wooden guitar and got out of the closet, dragged himself to the top of the stairs, and again threw himself down head first, passing out at the bottom. Once he came to, Thad made his way to the kitchen by dragging himself, passing out every few feet. And he knew, he said, I have to get to the kitchen. I have to. There's no other option. I'm going to die if I don't. This time, he was able to make it to the kitchen and able to make it to the phone. So it was one of those phones that's on the wall and it has a long, curly, dangly cord. And he said, thank God it had that cord. There's no way I would have been able to get up and reach it. Yeah. So he yanked the cord down. And another thing in his favor, the keypad was on the receiver.
Thank God for house phones.
I know, seriously. So he was severely dehydrated, starved, bleeding internally, and yet he still managed to dial 911. And they have a recording on Escaped of his 911 phone call. My God. And I cannot imagine how calm and collected he sounds. This is a 13-year-old boy. He had just survived probably one of the worst torture that you could ever do to somebody. And he is not hysterical. He is in full survival mode. Like, he is just, I'm here. This is where I'm at. I'm alone. Come get me. So the police got there. They were shocked by what they saw. They were shocked at the state of the house, how disgusting it was. And they were shocked that Thad had, they said specifically, the grit to survive the ordeal that he went through. His legs were so swollen and they were black from all the bruising and the internal bleeding and all the breaks. So they got him on a stretcher, they took him to the hospital, and they were trying to save his life. They said he was within hours of death. They arrested Joe at a party. He was at a party, just partying.
It's fucking sick, man.
Yeah. So at the hospital, even though he was heavily medicated, heading into surgery, the police interviewed Thad. They wanted to get his interview as soon as possible. And Thad told them, I'm not the only one. He did this to somebody else. In fact, he had done it to two other kids, two other boys. Oh, my God. And Thad remembered the name Chris Steiner, but he couldn't remember the other boy's name. So they never found out who that third boy was.
Oh, no.
Joe never confessed, and Thad did his best to remember, but he said, I can't remember. I cannot imagine living through that and knowing there was someone else and then not being able to remember the name.
Yeah, but I mean, that's...
No, like the what a heavy burden.
Yeah.
To have to carry with you. Even though it's not your fault. This kid was a monster.
It's honestly surprising he remembered anything from any of it.
Yeah, well, what happened was he remembered his first name, Chris. And he said, his name is Chris, and then the last name starts with an S. And but I can't remember the last name. So what they did is his dad brought him a phone book. And in the hospital, he went down the list of names of S's in the phone book. And he found Steiner. And he's like, that's it. That's his name, Chris Steiner.
This kid was already like a serial killer when he was 17.
Yeah. An absolute monster. So they exhumed and they x-rayed Chris Steiner's body. Normally, they According to the district attorney on Escaped, she said normally they do a long bone x-ray during an autopsy, but for whatever reason they didn't. They just did a skull x-ray for Chris Steiner. So they had to exhume his body, and the Steiners wanted to know what happened to their son, so they consented to the
exhumation of his body.
Yes, thank you. Exhumation of his body. So they x-rayed the long bones in Chris Steiner's body, and they layered Thad's x-rays on top of Chris Steiner's x-rays, and they were nearly identical breaks. Every place where Thad had a broken bone in his legs, Chris Steiner had a broken bone in his legs as well.
This is such a sick and bizarre, like, what is it, pathology? This is just so intense.
It's very intense and very strange and so fucked up. He's 17 years old.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Imagine if he hadn't have gotten caught. The escalation of somebody at 17 who's doing this kind of behavior.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. During the trial, Joe admitted to taking Thad, but he says he blacked out during the torture sessions.
Oh, of course.
Uh-huh. He was found guilty and sentenced to 100 years for the kidnap and torture. Specifically, I think the charge was mayhem. He was charged with mayhem. And he was 100 years. Yeah, good fucking riddance. All right, so after he was sentenced to 100 years for Thad, a year later, he was found guilty of Chris Steiner's murder, and he received an additional life sentence in prison. And he will be eligible for parole in 2110, and he will be roughly 150 years old. So he is never.
Well, at 150, he can be paroled.
And then I hope when he comes out of prison, walks out of the gates at 150, someone fucking pushes him over and breaks his legs.
Seriously.
So he will never get out of prison.
Thank God.
Thad said on I Survived, at the end of that show, they say, ask, why do you think you survived? And he said, I survived because of my family. All I thought about was my family and being with my family. And then on Escaped, he said, it said he doesn't hear much about Joe's life in prison, but he said he hopes he gets beat up every single day in prison.
That's fair.
Which, yeah, I do too. I do too, honestly. So when the police went through the house, they found a notebook in Joe's room, and it had 3 lists. A get to now list, can wait list, and leg thing list. And then on those lists were names of boys in the town.
God.
Teenage, young, 12 to 14-year-old boys in the town.
Jesus Christ.
So he absolutely would not have stopped.
No.
Thad saved every young teenage boy that would have come after him. He would 100%. Not have stopped. He would not have stopped. And getting back to Chris Steiner, so when the police found Chris Steiner's body, he had been missing for 6 days. And he actually, I think, was taken on July 3rd, 1994. And they asked his parents, was there anybody that you last saw your son with? Well, the only name that they came up with was Joe Clark. That was his name, by the way, Joe Clark. So they interviewed Joe Clark. Joe Clark was a friend of Chris Steiner's older brother, so he was familiar to Chris Steiner. They interviewed Joe Clark, and they were suspicious. They thought it was strange, but they couldn't find any proof. And then his mom provided an airtight alibi for him. She said that he was asleep all night in his bed. So they had run out of leads for Joe Clark. And I just think that his parents were, obviously they were disgusting housekeepers. Like it was like the landfill. It was disgusting.
Were they on drugs?
I wouldn't be surprised. And I feel like if they came home and saw what Joe had been doing while they were gone that weekend, they probably would have covered for him.
Oh, that's sick.
Their mattresses in the house were sheetless. They were soiled. There was black stains. There was yellow. It was disgusting.
So they were either like on white drugs or hardcore alcoholics. Nobody just lives like that in a normal state of mind.
It was gross. And I can't imagine Joe's girlfriend going over to that house and like wanting to date somebody after seeing the state of his dwelling. It was like out of a episode of Hoarders. It was bad, but even worse than Hoarders because it was just filth. Oh God, it was filthy. So yeah, Thad saved everybody that was supposed to come after him. He saved their life, and the will of a 13-year-old who was new to the town. They had just moved there 2 weeks ago.
Oh my God.
They had just moved there 2 weeks ago.
Holy hell.
Just this small suburban Midwestern town was this monster, this 17-year-old psychopathic monster was hiding within like Midwestern suburbia. It's just crazy. It's crazy to me. And that is
a hero.
Yeah. There's no telling how many lives he saved by his sheer will to live and to survive.
I'm so sorry that Thad went through that, but he definitely saved lives, and he's definitely a hero.
Yeah. He had multiple surgeries after for several years, and he still walks with a limp. He still lives in Baraboo, and he doesn't really talk much about his experience, obviously. So that is the survival story of Thad Phillips. If that, like, freaking wild and crazy.
You did such a fantastic job. That is an amazing story, and I can't believe I didn't know it.
Thank you. It was hard. It was, as a parent.
It's hard to do the kids' stories, 1,000%.
It really is, especially the so horrific about this story is as a parent, you feel like the safest place for your child is in their bed, in their home, and then you just have this monster coming in and plucking your children out of their home.
And you would never suspect it to be another kid.
No. This is a good, lock your fucking windows, people. If Richard Ramirez didn't teach you anything, let this fucking psychopath, Joe Clark, teach you. Lock your fucking windows. And I am not victim shaming by any means. This is just a reminder. No matter how rural, how suburban, how safe, it could happen to anyone. Lock your windows.
Yeah, I have a teenage son, and I did get a little emotional when you were talking about that. It was really sad, but like I said, you did a great job.
Thanks. Thank you so much.
Okay. Are you ready? It just started raining, so if you hear a little pitter-patter, it's rain.
I don't mind pitter-patter. I like it.
Sorry. We don't have a podcast loft. I'm just at home. How's your martini?
It's fantastic. I think every sip it gets better.
Good. Sorry, I just feel like I need to decompress a tiny bit after your story, so I wanted to ask you.
Seriously, I've needed to decompress for like the last 4 days.
All right, so my main source was a womensday.com article by Maria Carter, and I also watched an I Survived. And I have a few other sources, but we'll just list them in our episode description. So, January of 2004 in Wisconsin. Can you believe we both did that?
No.
Pretty crazy. Teri Jendusa-Nicolai was at her ex-husband's house attempting to pick up her children. It was the 3-year anniversary of their divorce. Their marriage had been a nightmare for Teri. David Larson had changed once they were married. He was abusive. He was incredibly controlling. He made her use the bathroom and shower with the door open. Their doors had locks on the inside for which only he had the key.
Okay. That is freaky.
Yeah. Any small thing could make him fly off the handle. And finally, Teri couldn't take the abuse any longer, and with her 2 young daughters, left David.
Good for her.
Now, 3 years later, Teri had remarried and was expecting a baby with her new husband.
Aww.
Because of the violence in their marriage, Teri usually insisted on meeting at a public place.
Mm-hmm.
But on this day, like I said...
Oh, no.
She was at their former home. So this was the house that they had shared together when they were married. And this house, which is another similarity our stories share, was at borderline hoarder levels.
Ugh, gross. Those poor little girls that had to live in that.
David had kept all of the relics of their past relationship.
Oh, my God.
Including, get this, their wedding video, which he showed. Okay, so he had their wedding video, and he would show it to their daughters as proof that mommy lies.
What a fucking creep.
Yeah.
It's so scary to be in a relationship with someone and have children, and then it doesn't work out. Maybe it's amicable, maybe it's not. And then be able to trust that person with the care of your children. You have to share custody. And if you cannot prove that he was abusive to those children, you have to share custody. And then they do fucked up things like that. And now, sorry to kind of go off on a tangent, but they have just parental alienation is a form of child abuse. And that's basically like alienating the co-parent or the other parent, which is exactly what he was doing by, gaslighting them and abusing them with parental alienation by showing that video and then saying, your mommy's a liar. See this? Yeah. And it's so hard to prove. And back then, even it was probably not even a thing.
Yeah, probably not. Even though it's only 2004, probably not. So Teri knocked on the door, and David answered alone, saying the girls were playing hide and seek and wanted Teri to find them. She was hesitant, but finally entered. In the I Survive, she said something to the effect of, I'm a mom first, and I just know they like playing hide and seek games.
He fucking used her love against her.
Her daughters were 4 and 6 years old.
Oh my God, this guy.
When she entered, David began beating her with a baseball bat. He attempted to suffocate Teri with her socks that had been pulled off in the struggle, but Teri kept turning her head so he couldn't really get to her mouth. During the struggle, her sweatpants had also been ripped off. David then put tape over her face and taped her hands together.
Oh my God.
Finally, after a brutal beating that included part of her skull being crushed,
oh my gosh,
David began to push Teri into an empty garbage bin.
Fucking monster, man.
Teri remembers having the presence of mind to flip around, so she went in feet first. Which is, like I said during your story, it's just incredible that she could even think at this point.
It's the power of a human survival. It's like the strongest instinct and will that we have as humans, and it's incredible.
It is. It's so impressive. So then, after Teri was forced into this garbage bin, David dragged the garbage bin outside, filled it with snow, because this was January in Wisconsin.
In Wisconsin, yeah.
Yeah. Put the lid on it, and loaded it into the bed of his truck. The girls were in an upstairs bedroom the entire time. When the truck began to move, Teri remembered that she had her cell phone. She dialed 911, and through the tape that covered her and the snow that surrounded her body, she said David's address over and over.
Fuck yeah, Teri.
Then they lost connection.
Shit.
Teri called back again. This time Teri was able to say that her ex-husband was trying to kill her and she was in the back of a green truck. Finally, after an hour and a half of driving, the truck stopped. Teri heard her daughters laughing and running around. She stayed quiet because she didn't want to traumatize them.
Oh my gosh.
She also knew that there was nothing they could do.
Oh my goodness. What an angel this lady is.
She was such a mom on the I Survived. It's just, she was just incredible. Unfortunately, at this point, her cell phone rang.
Oh, no.
And David heard it and pulled it from the trash can.
Oh, shoot. Was it 911 calling back? Oh, God. If it was literally, your car warranty is running out, I swear, if it was a telemarketer, I would have hunted them down.
Yeah. On the I Survived, she said that she didn't know who
it was.
Who had called.
It was probably 911 calling her back.
So Teri's last connection to help was gone at this point. By this time, Teri's husband, Nick, was alerted to something being wrong. He called the police, and they realized that David's address was the same address they had received in a 911 call hours earlier. Police officers had been to David's house, but it was empty. They had already left by the time they got there. Officers were putting together the pieces to this puzzle very quickly, though. Now everyone knew something was seriously wrong, and Teri was in danger. Also, no one knew where the girls were. Nobody knew if the girls were hurt. It amped up the whole situation because there were 2 young children involved. Detectives returned to David's house again and found Teri's sweatpants she had worn that day and a large amount of blood on the floor. Approximately 100 police officers and countless volunteers searched for Teri around town, like in abandoned buildings, anywhere that they thought that she might have been hidden. An Amber Alert was put out. During all of this time, Teri was an hour away, fighting for her life in a storage unit, crammed into a garbage bin that was packed with now melting snow.
Oh, my goodness.
She said she just kept trying to move to keep her body temperature up.
Oh, my goodness.
She said thinking of her daughters, unborn baby, and husband kept her fighting.
This is crazy.
Police picked up David that evening when he arrived at work.
Oh, my. Yeah.
Like, everything's fine.
I just go into work like a normal fucking day. Just not a monster or anything. Just a regular old single co-parent dad. Just going to work.
Yeah. Detectives Chris Schmaling and Thomas Noss spent 6.5 hours questioning David. Every minute of them questioning him, just imagining Teri in this trash can covered in snow with no pants or socks on, too. It's just, oh, God, it's just brutal. At first, David claimed that Teri hadn't shown up, so he took the girls to a sitter before work. And the girls were found at the sitter, safe, thank God.
Yeah, thank goodness. Just thank goodness for Teri in the moment of trauma to have the foresight to think about her girls, because what if she would have screamed and the girls would have seen her? I mean, he would have had to make a choice.
Yeah, and who knows what his choice would have been.
She probably saved their lives.
So, you know, at first David, like I said, he was denying everything. He said that Teri hadn't even shown up at the house that day to pick up the girls. Finally, the police officers told him that they found Teri's sweatpants at his house.
Yeah, we know you're lying.
We know you're full of shit. Then his story changed. David claimed he had acted in self-defense, and the events of that day were a blur. And I watched another show called 3 Days to Live. And David told the most absurd bullshit story that he had turned around to grab the girl's backpack, and while his back was turned, Teri had a hammer that she held above her head, and for some reason, her sweatpants were also down around her ankles. It was the fucking dumbest thing. The police officer was like, I cannot believe that this was the story he concocted. And so, like, David basically hit her with the baseball bat in self-defense. It was just such bullshit, and just, like, nobody's going to believe you, especially not detectives, you idiot.
Because I always pull my pants down around my ankles before I attack someone with a hammer, because that's just
so logical. Yeah.
The audacity.
Seriously. So, even though his story was so stupid, now detectives could search him. And in David's wallet, it had tons of shit, tons of paper, business cards, whatever in it. They found a business card for the storage unit.
Fuck yeah. Stupid David. You're a stupid idiot.
Yeah, David sucks. Those detectives are awesome.
Yeah, they are.
Police found the storage unit And when they saw Teri, they decided to wait for paramedics to arrive to transport her because her condition was so severe.
Oh my gosh, poor Teri.
The police officer that found her, I think, was just on like a routine day for him. He wasn't expecting to be called to find something like this, and it was horrific.
Oh, right, because it was an hour away.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they probably called another department to go out and do a check on the storage unit.
Exactly.
Oh, shit. Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Oh, my God. Terrible for everybody.
Teri was in the garbage can for 26 hours.
Oh, my God.
Teri lost her toes to frostbite. She spent weeks in the hospital and had 10 surgeries.
Oh, my goodness.
She also lost her baby. On August 16th, 2005, David Larson was sentenced to 35 years in prison for attempted first-degree intentional homicide.
That's it?
Since this horrible event in Teri's life, she has become a victims' rights advocate. Teri has been instrumental in creating laws that protect domestic violence victims, like Wisconsin's SAFE Act, which takes guns away from abusers. She is the state chairman of Marcy's Law. The goal of Marcy's Law is to give victims continual rights. Victims had statutory rights, while the criminals' rights were protected in the Constitution. Teri said that constitutional rights are more guaranteed, and victims should, too, have the same rights.
Yes, absolutely.
This law was passed this year in Wisconsin.
Oh, my goodness. Go, Teri. Fucking go, Teri.
Teri also speaks at events to teach people about domestic violence and share her own story. Her story has been told on 2020, Oxygen's 3 Days to Live, I Survived, and countless other news interviews, things like that. She's been on a lot of shows. There is also a book about her story called Left for Dead, The Abduction and Survival of Teri Jendusa-Nicolai by David Alphin. A few years after Teri's harrowing ordeal, she and her husband Nick had a baby boy.
Oh, my goodness.
That always gets me.
Seriously.
Teri Jendusa-Nicolai says she is not a victim. She is a survivor.
Absolutely. Fuck yeah. You go, Teri. Congratulations. I just love stories like that because of someone going through something so traumatic and then coming out and helping other people, specifically domestic violence, because it can be so insidious. You know, your abuser starts off probably not abusive at all, and then it just slowly gets worse and worse and worse. And I think there's a lot of shame with domestic violence. Victims or survivors feel shame, and
Which they obviously they shouldn't.
No. And I think that in some cases can keep them in abusive relationships, among other things. People say, well, why don't you just leave? It's incredibly hard to leave an abusive relationship.
And it's also dangerous to leave.
Most of the time, your abuser is very good at isolating you and taking away your resources.
And belittling you to the point where you feel like that you don't even deserve to leave.
Exactly. And it's just so amazing that survivors like Teri give back to other domestic abuse survivors and victims because it's important.
It is, and she went through something so hard and so horrible, but she's strong enough to use her own story and her own experience to teach other people and hopefully prevent something like that from happening again. And it's just beautiful and it's empowering, and she is a fantastic woman.
And woman, mother, she's amazing. Amazing. To be fighting for your life but still have the instincts of a mother to protect your children before yourself is just, it's so, I can't even think of a word. It's so amazing.
It is. It's incredible. Well, I guess that wraps up our I Survived.
Yeah.
Roller coaster of emotions episode.
Super roller coastery.
Almost cried twice. I'm fine. We're fine.
I mean, and it's interesting that we both picked I Survived stories that had to do with being a parent or child. And because we're parents, and that's probably the, scariest thing, the most, scariest thing, horrifying thing that we could go through is, as a parent or have something happening to our children. It's, if you're a parent, like we are just like balls of like worry,
anxiety
behind a thin facade of everything's going to be fine. I'm fine. But Teri is an inspiration. That is an inspiration. And look, if Teri and Thad can survive the fucking fucked up things they went through, this is going to be one of our closest episodes coming into Thanksgiving. You can survive your family this year.
You can.
Your conservative grandma, you got this.
You can do it.
Overcooked turkey, no problem.
You've got this. Before we say our goodbyes, we just want to, as always, thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting our show. Thank you for the ratings, reviews, and subscribes, and the shares. We appreciate you.
Absolutely. So, on that note, don't forget to love yourself,
lock your doors,
and your windows, and light some sage.
Cheers to that.
Cheers to that.
Thanks again for listening to True Crime by Indie Drop-In. If you would like your show featured, reach out to us at Indie Drop-In on all social media or go to indiedropin.com. See you next time.